Hey everyone, welcome back to White Whale Fishing. Today we are continuing on with part 2 of what's in the spinning rod finesse box for fishing cold water. And we've got a lot of baits to talk about, so I'm going to try and get to this pretty quick. The majority of these baits that we're going to talk about are treble hook baits. So in the last video we talked about bottom hopping baits and slow moving baits, and I showed you the rod and reel I use for that, which is slightly different than the rod and reel I use for this. Similar size reel. It is a 2500 size, actually I'm sorry, this is a 3000 size reel. Basically same setup as far as line, 10-pound braid, 8-pound fluorocarbon. But I'm also, the one big difference is this rod has a moderate bend. You can kind of see it bending down here in the middle of the blank. And from what I understand, I don't have a lot of experience with it, that's going to help to absorb a lot of the shock, I guess you could say, with when you've got fish hooked with treble hook baits. So I'm hoping to put that theory to test, and let's dive into the baits. Talking about cold water, we're probably going to be fishing deep and then making our way shallow. At least that's how it works in my head. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is a deep running crankbait, but it's not your average crankbait, right? It's a flat-sided crankbait. I've got a couple different models in here. I've got some that make sound. I've got some that don't. I don't have a lot of confidence fishing crankbaits, especially from a kayak. Crankbait isn't something you generally throw from the bank because you're usually getting hung up. But that's one of my 2020 goals, is to get more familiar with crankbaits, different brands, different depths, different actions, and so I'm probably going to have a crankbait tied on the majority of the year. So fishing a medium diving, flat-sided crankbait is something that, from what I understand, works pretty well. These guys in this size are going to probably be getting down to the 10 to 12 foot range. Fishing in the winter, from what I've seen, from what I've noticed in my area, the water is typically pretty clear. So I think if the water is clear and I'm fishing deep water, I'm probably going to want to stick with something that's got a realistic type profile. So all of the medium diving, flat-sided crankbaits that I have in this box have a shad style profile to them. If the bass aren't that deep, if I find them a little bit shallower, then I'm going to be switching up to a different style crankbait. I've got a few of these. This is a Rapala. It is a flat-sided crankbait, but it's a jointed crankbait. So this guy's going to dive to about 7 feet, I believe, 7 to 8 foot. This guy's got a rattle. I do have, this guy almost sounds like a one knocker. The other version that I have, it's got a bunch of really small BBs, got a much different higher pitch to it. But this guy will probably be seeing some time on the water, maybe as the water warms up and the fish move up a little bit. Talking about other hard baits, can't really have a talk about fishing cold water without talking about a lipless crankbait, but this is a small profile 1/4 ounce lipless crankbait. I even have some 1/8 ounce lipless crankbaits. I think this is 1/4 ounce. It may be even lighter. It may be 1/8. But I've got some rattle traps. I've got some Rapalas, different profiles, different finishes. Got to let the fish tell me what they want. This is something that would be cast out and kind of hopped off the bottom. You know, you lift your rod tip up, you feel it vibrate 5-6 times, drop it on a slack line, and fishing it almost similar to like you would fish a jig in the summertime. But had some good success on lipless crankbaits in cold water so far this year, hoping to expand on that. The Squarebill. I think a lot of people, I think this is a sleeper bait this time of year if there's some fish up shallow. I don't think a lot of people throw a Squarebill this year, and I'm always trying to be a little bit different. So this is a KVD 1.0, really small profile crankbait, obviously, like you can see. Got a cool little bomber. This is silent, this is not, but something that's going to be tied on for sure. Anybody remember this bait? That is a Rapala shallow shad wrap. And I have a feeling, you guys see the shape of that lip? That's an L-shaped lip. You guys are going to see that come into play a lot this year. Sixth Sense has one. Todd Castledine is designing one for Strike King. I've had this, I couldn't even tell you, 2 decades, and it's caught fish for me before. These small profile Squarebills, and this is definitely something you could fish from the bank. The other baits that I've covered so far, probably not, because you're going to be, getting hung up constantly. But this is definitely something that I have some confidence in fishing from my days in Florida that'll be seeing some action on the water this cold water season. If I need to slow down, but I want to keep fishing crankbaits, or I want to keep fishing hard baits, the next thing I'm going to reach for is going to be some sort of jerk bait. Some of the models I have are suspending, some are slow floating, some are slow sinking. And from what I understand, the general basic rules are, if the water is cold and not rising in temperature, you want to fish something that's either suspending or slow sinking, because it's emulating a dying bait fish. If the water is cold and slowly rising in temperature, then you want to fish a bait that is slowly rising. Suspending jerk baits are tricky because they are typically tuned in a factory at a very specific water temperature, and I think that is around 55 degrees. So I have noticed this time of year, my water temps are in the 30s. Some of my jerk baits are sinking, some of them are floating. I've got to play around with modifying that, and there's a couple things you can do. Number one, you can buy some Storm suspend dots, and you can put some suspend dots or suspend strips here towards the front if your baits are rising to get them to sink. Another thing you can do if you don't have suspend dots is you can add a split ring to the front hook hanger, or you can even increase the size of this front hook to add a little bit more weight here. It's just something that you've got to play around with. But definitely looking to build confidence in a suspending jerk bait. I had a little bit of success on some husky jerks fishing last year from the bank on sunny days when the fish moved up shallow to feel some of that warmth. So that's why one of the main reasons they're in here. Leaving the hard bait category, kind of jumping into the soft bait category, we're going to start talking about swim baits, and finesse swim baits specifically. Something like a 3-inch Crytek, and this is just rigged on a ball jig. Nothing fancy about this, but the great bait to cover water. Cast it out. You can fish it in different depths to try and locate those bass. But I think out of all of these, this is probably one of the best search baits in the box. You could fish it on an underspin. I think everybody's familiar with what an underspin is. I'll be throwing an underspin for sure. But the one thing that I will be throwing that I don't think a lot of people are doing is an Okashira screw lock head. And this guy spins. It's got a little propeller on the front. This isn't the best bait to cover water with because it's not a very heavy weight. The heaviest they make is a 1/8 ounce. But once you've found them, I think this is a really interesting bait to get maybe some finicky bass to bite, because that propeller, as it's spinning, causes vibration, and that's going to speak to the bass's lateral line. Another thing that's pretty unique about this is because that propeller spins, this bait can be fished slower than a traditional 1/8 ounce finesse swim bait. So, you can slow your presentation down quite a bit. I think that's pretty cool. Last year was the first year that I've ever fished every single month of the winter here in the Midwest. I'm not from here. I'm from Florida. I didn't grow up fishing cold water. My fishing goal last year was simple: catch a bass in every month of the year, and I did it. But I couldn't have done it without this next bait. This next bait is one of everybody's favorite baits, but it's slightly different. The chatterbait is what got it done for me, but specifically this style chatterbait. It's called a Flashback 75, and Z-Man makes it. It's a really small head. I don't know the weight. Maybe it's an 1/8, maybe it's a 1/10, maybe it's a 16th. Doesn't cast very far, but man, this guy got me bites when nothing else would get me bites last year. Comes in a couple different colors, gold blades, silver blades. Comes with two or three baits in the pack, different tails. There's a curly tail and a paddle tail. But for you bank anglers, really, really cold water, you're not getting fish to bite, look into this, give it a shot. Maybe you don't want to fish a chatterbait that small. Go to a bigger chatterbait, but take the skirt off of it for Christ's sake, right? And put a finesse swim bait on the back of it. This is a Crytek Easy Shiner, and I really like this swim bait on a bladed jig because it doesn't have a big old wide kick like a Fat Swing Impact. It's got much more of a tight wiggle. But did you guys notice that this is rigged upside down? Right, so something that I picked up from Tactical Bass, and I've put it to work, and I've applied it, and it's worked. On any chatterbait, on any bladed jig, if you rig a swim bait right side up and you fish it, the tail gets sucked up, and it's got this weird, funky, slow wobble. So your head's moving really fast, and your tail's moving really slow. It doesn't work well. I never caught a bass on it. And I think it has something to do with the water displacement that the blade creates as it's moving. I think the water comes in this way, it comes over, it creates some funky little vortex here. This tail gets sucked up, and it has something to do with the shape of this tail. So once you rig it upside down, none of that happens. The tail wiggles fast, the head wiggles fast, and it just flat out works. If you haven't tried it, give it a shot. The very last bait that I'm going to talk to you guys about today is a bait I've never caught bass on, and I'm looking for your help. Please help me with this. It's a blade bait. We don't fish these in Florida. So I think this has hit the water maybe 10 casts. I know it smashes smallmouth here in the Midwest in deep water and cold water, but I need some help. How do you retrieve it? Where do you throw it? Please help me, everyone. So this is going to be hitting the water also, so I can build confidence in it, especially if it's a really tough day and nothing's getting bit. That's probably what I'm going to go, hey, if nothing else is working, let's give this a shot. But you guys, you've seen everything in the box, right? Here's a look at the box. You've seen everything in it. The finesse baits, the hard baits, that's it. I'm not doing any fishing anytime soon because Punxsutawney Phil is a jagoff, and he lied to us, but whatever. I've got 6 inches of snow on the ground. All my ponds are frozen up. So I've got to monkey around in the garage and play around with my tackle and have dreams about fishing. But thanks for watching. I appreciate it. If you didn't grow up fishing cold water, maybe you learned something. I'm still learning myself. If you guys got tips, tricks, drop them in the comments below. Let's start talking about it. I appreciate you watching. I hope you're fishing. If you're not, you're in the same boat as I am. Our time's coming soon. Hopefully, one of these days, we'll get out on the water and we'll be able to put some fish stank on our hands. Y'all have a good one. Peace out. Tight lines. See ya.